All right, what's up, guys? We're live in the newsroom here at Fox 5 Live at Fox 5 DC. Happy Wednesday, May 9th. We're happy to have you here on our stream. We want to get right to the important stuff that's happening on Capitol Hill right now. Some of the live news that we're going to be covering today is CIA Director candidate Gina Haspel's confirmation in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Now, this is somewhat contentious today because the big news is that in her past, back in 2002, Gina Haspel oversaw a black site terrorist interrogation site in Thailand, and this had to do, that included waterboarding, which is, of course, extremely controversial, and tons of the senators today who are questioning her are asking her about that. Just in the last hour or so, she vowed that she would not continue that if she does go forth and become CIA director, that mentality, that moral standpoint on waterboarding would not be the case in the future. She actually just said that on the stand, but still, the Senate is grilling her today in this part of the confirmation. She's up for the job of CIA director. According to President Trump, it's his pick. She'll be replacing Mike Pompeo, who moved over to Secretary of State. And just ahead of this hearing, the CIA actually released nearly 300 pages of now declassified documents that give a look into the agency's post-9/11 torture program. So a lot of these questions are going to have to do with that torture program, what she would do going forward, what she believes in now. And she will face some tough questions from this intelligence committee about all of that. Her career as a CIA agent, her involvement with some of the videotapes, and of course her involvement with this black site operation during that time. So let's jump right in there. We have a split screen going on. We have one camera right on Gina herself, and then the other on sort of the room as she is providing her answers to these questions, and this testimony continues. So let's jump right in there on Capitol Hill, guys. Here we go.
There is a written record that fully documents whatever may or may not have happened.
Senator, yes, and there were 2 reviews done of the written record by the Office of General Counsel and the Office of the Inspector General.
In other words, the CIA has a record no different from the federal court system, which keeps transcripts and allows sketch drawings, but does not allow video recordings in a federal courtroom. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
You were the chief of staff to Mr. Rodriguez when this happened, correct?
Yes.
And at his direction, you drafted a cable that he later sent.
That's correct.
Michael Morrell, who supported Hillary Clinton in the last election, cleared you of any wrongdoing in drafting that cable?
He did.
As did an investigation by the Office of Special Counsel and the Office of the Inspector General?
That investigation was closed without charges for Mr. Rodriguez or anyone.
Would holding you responsible for drafting a cable at your boss's direction make any more sense than holding a Senate speechwriter responsible for the boring speeches senators give on the Senate floor?
Senator, I'll defer to you.
I would submit that it does not. Finally, there's a lot of talk about policy guidance, and that there was some awareness by Mr. Rodriguez that higher officials in the government who were political appointees had qualms or expressed reservations. I would say that's another way for which politicians don't want to take responsibilities when they are placed in certain positions, whether they are elected or appointed, and give the answers that they are responsible for giving, yes or no, and take the chips to fall where they may.
Senator's time's expired. Senator Harris.
So let's just be clear. This hearing is not about the incredible importance of the service and sacrifice of the men and women of the CIA. That's not what this hearing is about. This hearing is not about the importance of the agency's mission, both of which I wholeheartedly support. This hearing is about your suitability to be the director of the CIA, and in our responsibility to participate in choosing who will be the next director of the CIA. The mission that we have now includes understanding that who we choose will be a signal to the men and women of the agency, to the American people, and to our neighbors around the world about our values as Americans on critical issues that range from our adherence to a rule of law to what we prioritize in terms of professional accountability and what we prioritize in terms of our moral authority as Americans and as a country. So one question I've not heard you answer is, do you believe that the previous interrogation techniques were immoral?
Senator, I believe that CIA officers to whom you referred,
It's a yes or no answer. Do you believe the previous interrogation techniques were immoral? I'm not asking, do you believe they were legal? I'm asking, do you believe they were immoral?
Senator, I believe that CIA
It's
did
a yes or no
extraordinary
answer.
work to prevent another attack on this country, given the legal tools that we were authorized
Please
to use.
answer yes or no. Do you believe in hindsight that those techniques were immoral?
Senator, what I believe sitting here today is that I support the higher moral standard we have decided to hold
Can
ourselves
you please
to.
answer the question?
Senator, I think I've answered the question.
No, you've not. Do you believe the previous techniques, now armed with hindsight, do you believe they were immoral? Yes or no?
Senator, I believe that we should hold ourselves to the moral standard outlined in the Army Field Manual.
Okay, so I understand that you've not answered the question, but I'm going to move on. So I understand that you, from previous answers, are serving as the authority over whether or not CIA information concerning you will be classified or not. Given an obvious appearance of conflict, will you agree to recuse yourself from the responsibility and the authority to make decisions about whether or not that information will be classified or not? Will you agree to recuse yourself of that responsibility and authority? Yes or no?
Senator, I am following the guidelines that exist at CIA, and there is another declassification authority. It's called the IRO. I have not interfered
do you
with
believe
this.
that you have the authority to recuse yourself?
I'll take that for the record. I may have the authority to recuse myself. I'm not a
Assuming you
lawyer. I'm not sure about that.
Assuming you do, and I believe you do, will you agree to recuse yourself from the responsibility and the authority of making decisions about what CIA information about you and your record will be classified or declassified?
Senator, if I had agreed with the proposals that have come up because people thought it would be advantageous to me, I think I would have been abdicating my responsibility to follow the rules that everyone at CIA follows.
Okay, and you also in this hearing have a responsibility to answer the questions that are being asked of you. I'm going to ask you a different question. Would you agree that given this appearance of conflict or potential conflict around the classification or declassification of these documents, would you agree that Director Coates instead should have the responsibility for declassification decisions regarding your background?
Senator, I think one important thing is that this committee plays a unique role to review the classified record. And we have sent over every piece of paper we can lay our hands on about my classified record, all of my evaluations over a 33-year career. And I hope every senator has had the opportunity to look at that classified material.
Indeed, I have.
But
I have another question for you then, because I only have a few minutes left. I only have a few seconds left. The president has asserted that torture works. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I don't believe that torture works. I believe that in the CIA's program, and I'm not attributing this to enhanced interrogation techniques, I believe, as many people, directors who have sat in this chair before me, that valuable information was obtained from senior al-Qaeda operatives that allowed us to defend this country and prevent another attack.
Is that a yes?
No, it's not a yes. We got valuable information from debriefing of al-Qaeda detainees. And I don't think it's knowable whether interrogation techniques played a role in that.
Thank you, my time is up.
Senator Cornyn.
Ms. Haspel, I note that one prominent national security expert has said that if President Obama had nominated you to be director of the CIA, it would be an easy decision to support your nomination. So it strikes me that you're being treated much differently than Director Brennan was, which Senator Cotton noted he was voted out of this committee by a vote of 12-3 and confirmed by a vote of 63-44 to be CIA director. So it strikes me, and this is not a question for you, this is an observation by me, that you and this president are being held to a double standard. And I think that's regrettable. I also remember that President Obama in 2009, when he declassified the Office of Legal Counsel memos that have been referred to here, promised the men and women of the CIA that, quote, "We will protect all who acted reasonably and relied upon legal advice from the Department of Justice, that their actions were lawful. They need to be fully confident that as they defend the nation, I will defend them." And I think this committee and this Senate should remember those words by President Obama and apply those when considering your confirmation. Senator Feinstein was kind enough about a year ago to send me a book by Peter Bergen called Manhunt. It's a 10-year history of the search for Osama bin Laden, where, as I was thumbing through it recently, I was reminded that post 9/11, President Bush was concerned about reports that he had received that Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda was meeting with Pakistani officials connected with their nuclear program to gain access to a nuclear device that they might then use for a follow-on attack against cities like Washington, D.C. Without divulging classified information, can you confirm that there were concerns about follow-on attacks using nuclear devices, biological weapons, other weapons of mass destruction that might have killed more innocent Americans, as happened on 9/11? Was that the environment in which you and the country were operating in at the time?
Senator, there were very grave concerns on that front, and indeed Al-Qaeda had those kinds of programs. Efforts to acquire crude, dirty bombs, efforts to develop, they had a program, a biological weapons program. I remember the operative who was in charge of that. There was very deep concern about potential contacts, and we continue to monitor this very closely today between extremists and Pakistani nuclear scientists.
So here we sit years following the terrible events of 9/11, feeling very safe and secure, thanks to the incredible work being done by the intelligence community, including the good men and women at the CIA, as well as the men and women who serve in the United States military. We're feeling very safe and secure, and the memories of that terrible event are very distant. But it strikes me that in addition to the double standard that I believe you and this president are being held to, compared to Secretary Brennan, Director Brennan, and President Obama's administration, that people have simply forgotten. And that's dangerous, to have forgotten the circumstances under which they were operating at the time and doing their dead level best to protect the country from a follow-on attack. I just want to note in closing that recently I had a chance to travel to a garden spot with the chairman and visit with some of those unnamed patriots.
Thank you for doing that.
In the CIA. And I was struck by talking to one gentleman. He was talking about his girlfriend that he no longer had. And I said,
it's a common story.
I said, this must be incredibly difficult on marriages and on relationships and on families. Would you just take just a second to comment about the sacrifices that intelligence officers, rank and file employees of the CIA make when it comes to those sorts of relationships? And
Senator, thank you. You know, maybe I could start by saying, I talked about how CIA's boots were the first on the ground in Afghanistan. We suffered the first U.S. casualty, but maybe it's important for the American people to know that CIA officers are still out there in Afghanistan. Our officers are out there fighting extremists, Al-Qaeda, and the Taliban. We have 125 stars on our memorial wall now. Many of those, it's shocking how many stars we've added. I believe we added 7 stars to our wall last year. Perhaps I could cite one personal example of an officer who worked for me. She was the most extraordinary woman. She was our #1 Al-Qaeda expert. I worked with her in the Counterterrorism Center. She was having her 3rd baby in those days following 9/11, but we needed her because she had such deep expertise. She later worked for me on terrorism issues in a foreign capital, and then she went to Afghanistan, and she and 6 colleagues were murdered by a suicide bomber who penetrated our base. These are very real sacrifices. These are my friends and colleagues. All of us at CIA have a commitment and an honor-bound obligation to uphold the memory of those officers, mothers who've left their children to go to the field and sometimes have given them their all in service of this country.
I thank Senator Cornyn and Senator Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Haspel. You've been working with the administration now for 15 months. You've had the opportunity to brief the president. Have you ever been alone with the president?
Senator, I'm usually there with Senator Coates, a brilliant analyst who delivers the actual analytic briefing, and usually the National Security Advisor, the Vice President.
There have been allegations, Mr. Comey one, that while he was alone, the president asked for a personal pledge of loyalty. If you were ever approached by the president and asked for a personal pledge of loyalty, what would you respond?
Senator, my only loyalty is to the American people and the Constitution of the United States. I am honored bound and will work very hard to deliver to this president and his administration the best performance and intelligence CIA can deliver.
And if you were approached in such a way and such a demand was made of you, would you inform this committee and the Congress that you had been so approached?
Senator, I've worked very closely with this president. I don't believe that such a circumstance would ever occur. CIA has been treated with enormous respect, and our expertise is valued for what we bring to the table.
If it occurred, would you inform the committee?
Senator, it's a hypothetical. I don't think it's going to occur. I'm very confident about that.
Does not seem to be a hypothetical. People have alleged that that has happened already.
Senator, I don't know anything about that conversation.
Okay. Now, Senator Harris was asking you about the morality of the enhanced interrogation techniques, the waterboarding. At the time that you were involved in it, in fact, fairly directly, you expressed no moral concerns. In fact, you have suggested that it was good tradecraft and that it contributed to information that was developed. If one of your operations officers was captured and subject to waterboarding today or tomorrow or the next day,
Senator will suspend. Capitol Police will remove.
Stop resisting! Stop resisting! And in many respects, you guys go into the secret life.
If there are any other further disruptions, I will ask the Capitol Police to remove all individuals. Senator can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If one of your operators were captured, subjected to waterboarding and enhanced interrogation techniques, which you, I believe, supervise, would you consider that to be moral, since perhaps the other entity did not have legal restrictions, and good tradecraft, as you appeared to do when you were involved in it previously?
Senator, I don't believe the terrorists follow any guidelines or civilized norms or the law. CIA follows the
Excuse
law.
me, madam. You seem to be saying that you were not following civilized norms and the law or anything else when you were conducting those self-same activities, if that's the analogy you're going to draw.
Senator, I'm sorry, can you I can't.
Very simple. You have an operations officer who is captured. He's being waterboarded. I've asked you very simply, would you determine that to be immoral and something that should never be done, condoned in any way, shape, or form? Your response seems to be that civilized nations don't do it, but uncivilized nations do it, or uncivilized groups do it.
The United States does it to its own
Civilized
soldiers.
nation, a civilized nation was doing it until it was outlawed by this Congress.
Senator, I would never obviously support inhumane treatment of any CIA officers. We've lost CIA officers over the years to terrorists. I just gave an example. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed personally killed a Wall Street Journal correspondent and filmed that. I don't think there's any comparison between CIA officers serving their country, adhering to U.S. law, and terrorists who by their very definition are not following anybody's law.
Finally, in the morale report, and which you've somewhat acknowledged, there was opposition to the destruction of the tapes by 2 White House counsels, the Counsel of the Vice President, the DNI, the DCIA, and a member of the Congress, and yet those tapes were destroyed. Do you consider that to be insubordinate actions without the director, in this case, Mr. Goss, being notified?
Senator, I think that consultation with the director was essential, and a lesson coming out of that is the importance of making sure all the stakeholders have agreed to include congressional oversight. There's also a leadership lesson. Don't let real security issues go unaddressed.
So the action was insubordinate, and you would not countenance anyone in your organization doing something like that?
I expect my officers to bring those difficult issues to me, and I think I have a reputation for not just leaving them in the inbox. I will say this, Mr. Rodriguez has taken full accountability for his decision, which he thought he was operating under his own authority.
Thank you.
Senator's time's expired. We've come to the conclusion of the open session, and I would duly note for members, it's my understanding that we're going to have 2 recorded votes starting at 12 o'clock. My intention is to start the closed hearing immediately after the second vote. And the Vice Chairman and I would like to make some closing statements. I do want to take the opportunity, Ms. Haspel, since 2 individuals have been mentioned, and they will be the subject of conversation in the closed session. But for the American people's purpose, would you share for them who Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is and Nasiri?
Chairman, thank you. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was the architect and mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. His nephew, Ramzi Youssef, was behind the 93 attack on the World Trade Center, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed financed that operation. He also was behind the infamous Bojinka plot in the Philippines. Tragically, he was the individual who personally killed a Wall Street Journal American correspondent and filmed that heinous act. He also, after 9/11, carried out an attack on a synagogue in Tunisia, and he had other attacks planned. We were able to warn allies about a planned attack, for example, on Heathrow Airport. Mr. Nashiri was the emir of the attack in 2000 on the USS Cole, in which we lost 17 sailors. He also was behind the attack on a French ship, the Limburg, and he was the Al-Qaeda chief of operations in the Gulf and the Arabian Peninsula.
I thank you for that. I think it's important to put into context when individuals are mentioned. what their role was in terrorism and why they were the focus of not only the agency, but law enforcement. With that, I'd like to recognize the Vice Chairman for any closing statements he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to submit for the record, to refresh my colleagues' memories, the testimony of then nominee John Brennan, who quite explicitly repudiated the EIT techniques and programs, who stated that he expressed his personal objections and some of his views to agency colleagues, which I think is a relevant piece of information when we considered Mr. Brennan's testimony for those of us who decided to vote in favor of him.
And that would be the same Senator,
excuse me,
that
sir.
would be the
Excuse
same
me,
Mr.
sir.
Brennan who supports her nomination.
Senator will suspend.
We need the full record on the record.
No, Senator will suspend.
John Brennan supports her nomination.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Let me also say this. A different experience for you. You have led your life serving our country in the shadows. But should you be confirmed in this position, you're going to have a whole different set of responsibilities that, candidly, I understand that perhaps nothing in your career has fully prepared you for. You have to not only earn our trust, where we have more exposure to your records and classified information, but you have to earn the trust of other members who are not on this panel and folks in the House who won't even consider this. You also, I think, have to earn the trust of the American public. So 3 brief points I want to make. I appreciate the fact and the support you have from the agency's workforce, and the fact that your confirmation will be the first time in 54 years an operations officer would be confirmed to be director. And I also understand what are normal procedures on declassification. But I think it troubles some of my colleagues when we do get stories that float from the press that point out some remarkable parts of your career, your interactions with Mother Teresa, the fact that you were shot at by foreign operatives, and there does appear to be information put forward by the agency that helps you. And I think many of us, and I've reviewed most of your record, I think there's many extraordinary things in your record, but the willingness to lean forward on that declassification, not for our benefit on this committee, we get that, but for other members and for the public, I'd hope you reconsider some of your decisions made there. I also appreciate very much, and at least my line of questioning, on the fact that you believe at this point that the RDI program is not consistent with American values. I wish you would have said that more clearly and more directly. I heard is all, and finally, the question that if you are asked by this president to take an action that you believed was immoral, regardless of the status of a legal opinion, we finally got to the point that you said you would not follow that. You gave me an even stronger answer in private. I just feel that as you try to gain our trust and other senators, and for that matter, the public's trust, you realize this is a totally different kind of role than you had any time in your career. And having clarity on these issues and having clarity on what your appointment will represent and what values you will bring to this critically important job at this moment in time is extraordinarily important. My hope and prayer will be that as we consider this nomination, the more you can bring us that clarity for those of us who want to give you that fair consideration that you deserve, and candidly, the extraordinary service you provided our nation is so important. So we can make the right judgment, so that we can know the character of the individual who will take on, again, one of the most important jobs in our country's protection, and particularly at this moment in time. So I thank you for your testimony. I would like to see more. I regret some of my colleagues' comments in terms of mischaracterization, but that's part of the process, and welcome to it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the Vice Chairman. I would ask unanimous consent to enter into the record 2 documents provided by Senator Feinstein in opposition to the nomination. One from myself, a statement of support from Attorney General Michael McCasey. I would expand my unanimous consent to include any documents that are for or against the nomination. And I would ask unanimous consent that every member be given the opportunity for additional follow-on questions. And those QFRs would need to be in by the close of business tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Very, very quickly, following up on that point you made, and I support that. I did have several additional questions for the public record, and if I could at least make clear, I think it's important to have those before we vote in the committee, those answers to the additional questions, and I just wanted to convey that, and I hope we can get consent for that too.
Duly noted.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask you a question, please?
Senator
briefly?
Point.
I think there's been some comment made about committee members not getting responsive information, but I know declassified materials have been provided in a public setting. It is true, isn't it, that classified materials will be made available to members in a classified setting?
Everything that I think has been requested is available to members, not to all staff. And any inquiry into those documents will be made available in the closed setting. And I stand to be here as long as we need be tonight for every senator to ask the full breadth of questions that they have. With that, Gina, I'd like to thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
And I look forward to continuing the conversation in the closed setting. Before we adjourn the open session though, I want to add a few closing remarks. As you know, I'm a strong supporter of your nomination to be director of the Central Intelligence Agency. I can think of few, if any, individuals as qualified to lead the agency as you are, particularly at this challenging time. You may, in fact, be the most qualified nominee ever nominated for this role. You've been a leader in the field and at headquarters. You have the respect of the workforce, of your peers, of Republicans, of Democrats, of military officers, and of civilian security leaders. You have the courage to speak truth to power, and you've demonstrated that courage time and time again. You're intimately familiar with the threats facing our nation. Where others can discuss world events, you've lived them. For you, there's no learning curve. You have a vision for the agency and its future. It's obviously informed by your career, your past experiences, but you bring a clear-eyed understanding of the agency's mission going forward, and I think you have re-emphasized that today. I support your nomination for all of these reasons, but I'm also mindful of the historic nature of your nomination and what it means for those first tour case officers and junior analysts that will join the agency this year and in years to come. I know you don't like to talk about it, so I will. Outside the agency workforce, not many Americans get an opportunity to walk the halls of the old headquarters building. Those who do, though, including the members and staff of this committee, frequently enter the OHB, climb the stairs, and turn down that hallway. As they do, they enter a series of portraits depicting former directors of OSS, Central Intelligence, and the Central Intelligence Agency. We see them every day, as does the workforce. Some of those directors were loved, some were controversial, and some little understood the agency they were asked to lead. Some made disastrous decisions out of hubris or inexperience or both. But one thing is common. All of the portraits are men. Many want to make your nomination about one small piece of agency's past. Most of us, though, are looking towards the agency's future. I think it's important to remember Director Brennan's, to put in context Director Brennan's not only time there and his testimony. But the fact is that you're being criticized for not speaking up when you were there, and nor did he. And I want to make sure that we don't hold you to a different standard for any reason. Averill Haynes and Moreau Park and others who have served, are currently serving, have cracked the glass ceiling at the agency. You're poised to break it. It may be impossible to measure the importance of that breakthrough, but I know that your confirmation will send a signal to the current workforce and the workforce of the future that a lifetime of commitment to the agency and its mission can still and will be rewarded. I want to thank you for your willingness to go through this treacherous process. I'm not sure if I was in your position that I would expose myself to it, but I thank you for your willingness to lead. I thank you for your willingness to serve. This hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, guys, if you're joining us on the stream, that's a live look inside the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing room where Gina Haspel was just on the stand answering a lot of questions about her past in those videotapes that the CIA destroyed that had waterboarding in them from some post 9/11 terrorist questioning. So obviously a lot of questions on that. You can see there Senator Byrd speaking there, and here's more of the journalists kind of surrounding Gina Haspel as she walks out. So it looks like right now the Republicans are actually holding on to the vote at 51 to 49. They hold that slim majority in this vote. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, Republican, said that he would not vote for her and does oppose her because of her role in that torture. And then, of course, Senator John McCain, Republican from Arizona, is undergoing treatment right now for brain cancer. So he may not even be available to vote in this instance. As this kind of plays out, guys, this is live on Capitol Hill. Let's go over to some brief tape playback from inside the cabinet. President Trump had a few words this morning. Check it out.
Thank President Xi. He was very helpful to us 2 days ago on something very specific. President Xi of China. China has been very helpful. And we're working on trade with China. And they're doing okay because they're helping us, and I guess they're probably doing a little bit better because they're helping us. But they have really helped us on North Korea. We appreciate it, and we appreciate President Xi. I just spoke to President Moon and explained what was taking place with respect to the three gentlemen. And President Moon of South Korea was very, very happy to hear it. He likewise has been incredibly helpful. So the relationships we have with Prime Minister Abe, President Moon, President Xi, I think it all goes into what is taking place right now. And we very much look forward to having the meeting between the United States and North Korea, and that'll be announced over the next couple of days. As to timing, we have a lot of things going on within our country. We've very much toughened up the border, but the laws are horrible. The laws in this country for immigration and illegal immigration are absolutely horrible. And we have to do something about it. Not only the wall, which we're building sections of wall right now. We have 1.6 billion. We're fixing a lot of wall that basically is non-existent because it's been ripped to pieces. It was poorly built and it wasn't is really only temporary in some cases. San Diego has asked us to go forward with their section of the wall in California. And rather than not doing that and letting them lobby for us with Governor Brown, we decided to do it. And we'll have a little bit less of a lobby, but we'll have a lot of people happy in San Diego. We have, I think, the numbers coming out from the economy. Are you seeing what's going on? They're extraordinary. The stock market is up almost 35% from the election, but I think companies are doing even better than that, and they're really ready to rock. The conference we had yesterday was a very important one. You look at the deal we had with Iran, it was a one-sided deal that ultimately was going to lead to nuclear proliferation all over the Middle East. And they were talking about it. Other countries were talking about it. It was going to lead to that. They are all very happy at what I did. That was a one-sided deal that we spent $150 billion and $1.8 billion in cash on getting done. And it was not good, and it was not appropriate. And we'll see how we do with Iran. Probably we won't do very well with them, but that's okay too. They've got to understand life, because I don't think they do understand life. If you look at what's happening in the Middle East with Syria, with Yemen, with all of the places they're involved, it's bedlam and death, and we can't allow that to happen. So we have terminated a terrible, terrible deal that should have never, ever been made. And we will be putting on among the strongest sanctions that we've ever put on a country. And they're going into effect very shortly. They're mostly constituted and drawn already. And we'll just have to see what happens. But we can't allow a deal to hurt the world. That's a deal to hurt the world. That's not a deal for the United States. That's a deal to hurt the world. And certainly Israel, you saw Benjamin Netanyahu get up yesterday and talk so favorably about what we did. Some of the senators, I watch them now as they say, oh, he shouldn't have done it. But they don't say it, the Democratic senators, they don't say it with their full throat. They don't say it with heart, because they have one problem. They were totally against it. Like Chuck Schumer was totally against the deal. He voted against the deal. He was fighting with Obama. In fact, I remember reading at the time, they ended up in a fight together over this deal because he wanted to protect Israel, and he knows this deal is very bad for Israel and very bad for the Middle East. But I know that they voted against it, and then you'll see Chuck Schumer say, oh, he shouldn't have ended the deal. It's like, oh, perhaps he changed his mind. But by the way, the deal only got worse. So we have a lot of exciting things happening, and I think that's going to be an exciting thing. And perhaps, and you know, Iran will never say it because they're great negotiators. Kerry was never had a chance against the gentleman he was negotiating with. The first time I saw that man, I watched him on a certain show, a show of an anchor who's no longer with us. He was taken down, but it was an interesting show. And I looked at him, and after about 3 minutes of watching the show, I said, there's no way that Kerry can negotiate against this gentleman. And that turned out to be a fact. So we're going to make either a really good deal for the world, or we're not going to make a deal at all. And Iran will come back and say, we don't want to negotiate. And of course, they're going to say that. And if I were their position, I'd say that too for the first couple of months. We're not going to negotiate, but they'll negotiate. Or something will happen. And hopefully that won't be the case. So I just want to let you know the United States is strong. Our military is in a position that we haven't had in a long time. We have $700 billion approved and $716 billion for next year, numbers that we've never had before. We're rebuilding our military to a level that it's frankly never been. And these are good times to have a strong military, and hopefully we'll never have to use it. You know, peace through strength, which I believe in very strongly. So we're honored by the fact that the 3 gentlemen are coming home. And I look forward to seeing you, probably some of you, maybe a lot of you. It'll be 2 o'clock in the morning. It'll be quite a scene, and it'll be, to me, it's very exciting because it represents something. It represents something very important to this country. People never thought a thing like this could happen, and it can. People never thought you were going to have a situation where we're having serious and positive communication with North Korea, and we are. What happens, who knows? But we have a chance at something really great for the world, and great for North Korea, and great for everyone. So I want to thank you all for being here, and we will see you at 2 o'clock in the morning. We're very excited.
So where's the, Mr. President, where's the summit going to take place?
We're going to announce that in 3 days, Joe. Within 3 days.
Within 3 days?
We're just working arrangements, but
Will it be the DMZ?
It will not be there. No.
Do you deserve the Nobel Prize, do you think?
Everyone thinks so, but I would never say it. You know what I want to do? I want to get it finished. The prize I want is victory for the world, not for even here. I want victory for the world, because that's what we're talking about. So that's the only prize I want.
Could something still scuttle this meeting for the summit?
Everything can be scuttled. Everything can be scuttled. Doesn't mean, a lot of things can happen. A lot of good things can happen. A lot of bad things can happen. I believe that we have, both sides want to negotiate a deal. I think it's going to be a very successful deal. I think we have a really good shot at making it successful, but lots of things can happen. And of course, you'll be the first to know about it if it does. But I think we have a really good chance to make a great deal for the world. Thank you very much.
And what are you going to do if Iran starts up their nuclear program again?
Say it.
What are you going to do if Iran starts up their nuclear program again?
Iran will find out. They're going to find out. I don't think they should do that. I would advise Iran not to start their nuclear program. I would advise them very strongly. If they do, there will be very severe consequence. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
All right, make it
Thank
way
you.
out. Let's go.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we're back in the newsroom. Thanks for joining us on the stream today here at Fox 5 Live at Fox 5 DC. That, of course, was President Trump inside the White House with his cabinet, talking about a variety of topics. Of course, saying that he will be there at the tarmac to greet those American detainees from North Korea at 2 a.m. tomorrow morning. So we're going to be looking out for that and bringing you some of that video, of course, when we can get it in. Hopefully, possibly live. We'll see what we can effort. We'll definitely be seeing that footage. Of course, though they will be returning with now Secretary of State Mike Pompeo from North Korea. So that's what he was referring to when he talked about those 3 men who have been detained there more than a year in North Korea. But other than that, guys, we'll take a look at some of the top stories of today. Of course, we were talking about the North Korea summit and some other topics. Gina Haspel being confirmed in the Senate and going through her hearing. We have more video of that we didn't actually catch. So if you want to see some of the other questioning, some of the hard-hitting questions from this morning from some of those senators, we're going to play that out in just a second. But first, take a look at some of the top stories that we've been working on across the nation, some of our sister stations, and here in D.C. Check it out.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in a surprise trip there, just as President Trump takes a hardline stance on Iran. The reaction in Iran has been predictable but intense, burning the U.S. flag in Parliament, all after a decision by President Trump to effectively pull the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal.
America will not be held hostage to nuclear blackmail. We will not allow American cities to be threatened with destruction.
The president actually went further than many expected, calling for reimposed sanctions and disappointing some traditional U.S. allies like Britain, France, and Germany, as well as the deal's biggest backer, former President Obama, who called the decision misguided and a serious mistake. But Trump's tough stance on Iran won backing from Saudi Arabia and Israel. And then this surprise right after the Iran announcement.
At this very moment, Secretary Pompeo is on his way to North Korea in preparation for my upcoming meeting with Kim Jong-un.
As Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been to North Korea before, but this time he is seeking the release of 3 Americans held in the North in advance of a possible meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un.
We want these people released. They shouldn't be human
Should it be part of the
bargaining
deal?
chips. It should happen before the deal.
And as far as that deal, that meeting is concerned, President Trump yesterday indicated that the time, date, and location have all been picked. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
I think there really is a prospect of this setting a very ominous precedent.
The fight to put Gina Haspel in control of the CIA has been a controversial one among lawmakers. Tuesday, Haspel met with Oregon Senator Ron Wyden, one of several Democrats who will determine her fate. He has been pushing the CIA to declassify documents about her role in the agency's enhanced interrogation program, developed after 9/11.
If this is allowed to go forward as what I have called a secret confirmation process, it sure as heck won't be the last one.
Haspel is expected to address her 3 decades as a CIA operative today in her opening statement, saying, quote, "Having served in that tumultuous time, I can offer you my personal commitment, clearly and without reservation, that under my leadership, CIA will not restart such a detention and interrogation program." But others aren't sold. Senate Majority Whip Dick Durbin says the CIA is pushing too hard for Haspel. In a letter to Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates, Durbin wrote Tuesday in part, "Congress is being lobbied aggressively, and we must consider whether our intelligence agencies should conduct public affairs campaigns aimed at a co-equal branch of government." If Haspel passes through committee and the full Senate, she would be the CIA's first female director. But her confirmation vote is seen as a toss-up because of wavering support from Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
No one is above the law. No one should be afraid to come forward.
Strong and swift reaction from New York Governor Andrew Cuomo today after the New Yorker magazine published an article detailing allegations of 4 women who claim they suffered physical abuse at the hands of the state's highest-ranking law enforcement officer, Democratic Attorney General Eric Schneiderman.
These women should have their day in court. They should have the opportunity to tell a district attorney the facts and circumstances.
All 4 women describe similar incidents of being slapped and choked by Schneiderman. 2 of the women, Michelle Manning-Barish and Tanya Selvaratnam, say they required medical treatment after their alleged assaults, but were too afraid to go to police. In a statement, Schneiderman said, "In the privacy of intimate relationships, I have engaged in role-playing and other consensual sexual activity. I have not assaulted anyone. I have never engaged in non-consensual sex, which is a line I would not cross." Hours after the article went online, he resigned, saying the allegations would be too much of a distraction for him to continue. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office has launched an investigation. Schneiderman helped champion the Me Too movement. In February, his office filed a civil rights suit against movie mogul Harvey Weinstein for sexual assault allegations. He has also been a vocal critic of President Trump and was praised by the left for promoting the so-called resistance to the president's policies. In August of 2013, Schneiderman filed a civil lawsuit against Mr. Trump's now-defunct real estate seminar program, claiming fraudulent, illegal, and deceptive conduct. The following month, Donald Trump responded in a seemingly prescient tweet. "Weiner is gone, Spitzer is gone. Next will be lightweight AG Eric Schneiderman. Is he a crook? Wait and see, worse than Spitzer or Weiner." Schneiderman was scheduled to headline an event this week called Taking on Trump. That appearance has been canceled.
An interim replacement will be chosen by the state legislature. Voters will choose a new attorney general in November. In New York, Laura Ingle, Fox News.
it was honestly just another huge blessing that came our way.
18-year-old Jerry Ramirez says he's been blown away by all the community support he's received since stopping to help victims in a serious crash.
I want to, really thank him from the bottom of my heart. Like, this wouldn't have been possible without them.
Ramirez's insurance didn't cover him for theft, so he was out of luck when it came to getting a new car after a suspected drunk driver stole, then crashed his the night of April 13th. But after hearing his story, strangers donated more than $15,000 for a new car. Then Eric Barbosa and the team at Greenville Chrysler offered to donate a car, no strings attached.
We just knew that he needed a car. His car got totaled, and here at the store we usually help people with cars, so thought it was a good idea to get a hold of him.
But after talking it over with his family, Ramirez had a surprising response.
It didn't feel morally correct to accept the car after, a lot of people had helped out for the sole purpose to help me get another car.
Which astonished me, and then I told him what he could do is possibly get the car and redonate it.
Ramirez immediately thought back to his friend Jeremy Poor, who set up the online campaign to help him and was with him the night of the crash. His own car was out of commission from an unrelated accident, so he gifted the free car to Poor and used the donated money to buy his own car.
We were given an opportunity to help people who, are in need of a car, and it's gonna, help a lot of people most of all.
He could have easily just taken it and got both. There's no greed there. There's just pure heart.
Leanne Wynn, Fox News.
As gas prices rise.
Oh my God. We just can't do it.
Sherry Wilson, who drives for Uber and Lyft, says she's feeling the pain. She says rising prices have really hurt her bottom line.
When I first started, gas was only $2.20 a gallon. Now it's up to almost $3 a gallon, depending where you shop. That makes a big difference.
Sherry's sister also drives for Uber to supplement her income and says even before today's announcement, which is expected to push gas prices higher, times were tight as a rideshare driver.
I'm scared to death because I depend on that extra money to pay for my car and to pay for groceries and things like that.
The women say initially the flexibility and the money drew them to Uber and Lyft. They now complain the companies don't pass on raises to their drivers. High gas prices and a low return on their time are now driving them away.
When gas prices were low, I was making about $100 a day.
And now?
$48 a day.
In fact, I'm looking for a job right now. I just can't do it.
Linda Williams, Fox 10 News.
There is a budding debate in Louisiana over a state law requiring florists to pass a test to sell flowers, the only state in the country to do so. The latest proposal in the State House to scrap the practice didn't have enough support to remove the license requirement for florists, frustrating opponents of the status quo who say it isn't necessary.
If we're going to test competency, let's make sure that it's enough of a threat to public health and public safety to warrant this type of thing. And then otherwise, let's let the free market dictate who's a good florist, who's a bad florist.
The exam includes topics such as the proper temperature for flowers, identifying different plants, and how to give the best product to consumers. The commissioner of the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry opposed any changes to the law, saying in a statement, the state of Louisiana requires a professional retail florist license to sell floral arrangements, or one must be employed under the supervision of a licensed florist. While other states do not require a license, most states have some sort of permit, education requirement, and or some sort of certification to regulate the floral industry. Members of the Louisiana State Florist Association pushed to stop the proposal, but some outside the organization are split on the license requirement. Brenda Goff isn't affiliated with the association, but sees valid points on both sides.
I mean, it might could be looked at and there's some sort of qualifications or some sort of permit that you could create that has some sort of standard. I actually want to encourage young people to get into this, and I don't want anything that might deter them from it.
Those in the floral industry believe some of the requirements in the Pelican State are overblown.
Generally, just for the flowers to come into the country, they have to go through a process with the Department of Agriculture. Maybe once in a while I'll see a bug, but it could have come in from outside. Nothing has ever been harmful.
There's currently no path forward for the proposal, but Emerson says she's likely to try again during the next legislative session. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Willie James Inman, Fox News.
So just a little taste there of some of our top stories that we've been thinking about and talking about today. But I want to bring you back to Gina Haspel's hearing from this morning. In case you didn't catch all of it, I know we kind of jumped in while it was already in progress. But some of the questioning, some of the intense interrogation for her, the CIA director nominee, Trump's pick to be nominee, was on the stand this morning and faced a lot of questions regarding the waterboarding videos, the black site that she was sort of leadership over in Thailand post 9/11. So lots of questions on if that type of interrogation would continue. Haspel says no, it would not. She would not reinstate that type of interrogation for terrorism. So let's check out some of the footage from this morning's hearing as we go into this next portion of our show, guys. As always, if we have any live or breaking video coming in, we'll jump you right over to whatever is current coming in on our streams.
At the time that the program was created?
No, I had just returned from an overseas posting. I was a GS-15. I was not yet a member of the Senior Executive Service. I was assigned as a deputy group chief. That's pretty far down the totem pole in a program that had nothing to do with the detention and interrogation program.
You said that the program had already been in effect for some time before you were read into it. What was your reaction when you learned of the program?
Senator, it was a new subject for me. As I said, we lacked interrogation expertise at the agency. We didn't have interrogators. I was told that interrogation experts had designed the program, that the highest legal authority in the United States had approved it, and that the President of the United States had approved it, as well as a trusted leadership at the Central Intelligence Agency.
Have your views of the program evolved in the years following the attacks on our country on 9/11?
Senator, they have. I think it's very important. I think for any leader, as you go through a career, you have to learn the leadership lessons. I'm not going to sit here with the benefit of hindsight and judge the very good people who made hard decisions, who were running the agency in very extraordinary circumstances at the time. But as I mentioned to Senator Warner, this country has had the opportunity to reflect because we have some space. We're not fearing another attack. And we have deliberated about the standard we want to use in interrogations, and that is the Army Field Manual. The very important thing to know about CIA is we follow the law. We followed the law then, and we follow the law now. But I would never permit CIA to resume an interrogation program.
So that's a very good segue into a very important question. As a candidate, President Trump repeatedly expressed his support for waterboarding. In fact, he said we should go beyond waterboarding. So if the CIA has a high-value terrorism suspect in its custody, and the president gave you a direct order to waterboard that suspect, what would you do?
Senator, I would advise, I do not believe the president would ask me to do that, but we have today in the U.S. government other U.S. government entities that conduct interrogations. DOD uses the Army Field Manual, and they conduct battlefield interrogations, and CIA has incredible expertise it can bring to the table in support of those interrogations. The FBI has its authorities to conduct interrogations, and as you know, we have the High Value Interrogation Group. So, you know, I would advise anyone who asks me about it that CIA is not the right place to conduct interrogations. We don't have interrogators, and we don't have interrogation expertise. So I believe that that would be The reason I have been nominated is that people have some respect for my views on these issues. My experiences during those days after 9/11 inform my views. I'm extremely knowledgeable, and I'm also extremely knowledgeable about the price CIA working level men and women out in the trenches paid for decisions made after 9/11.
So debriefing a source is very different from interrogating a detainee. Should the CIA even be in the business of interrogating detainees?
We're not in the business of interrogating.
Because of the Hig is what you're saying.
Well, we're not in the business of interrogating detainees. As you said, there's a big difference between interrogation and simple question and answer. Having direct access to a terrorist is extremely valuable for intelligence collection, and we do that. But CIA does not today conduct interrogations. We never did historically, and we're not getting back in that business.
Thank you.
Senator's time's expired. Senator Heinrich.
Ms. Haspel, you didn't actually answer the question. What would you do if the president ordered you to get back in that business?
Senator, the president has selected me to give him advice. I would not restart under any circumstances in an interrogation program at CIA, under any circumstances.
Thank you. You have repeatedly said that at the time, the CIA's use of interrogation techniques like waterboarding were determined to be legal. Now, there was an opinion written by the Office of Legal Counsel. I don't believe those actions were ever legal. They certainly didn't meet the bar set by either the Geneva Conventions or our own Army field manual. And I'm not aware of a single court ruling that affirmed that opinion. Today, I'm not really interested in whether you believe those techniques were legal, but I am interested in the question that Senator Warner asked you. We got a very legalistic answer to that question. Let me ask you again, were these the right thing to do? Are they consistent with American values, fundamentally? What do you believe?
Senator, I believe very strongly in American values and America being an example to the rest of the world. That is why I support the fact that we have chosen to hold ourselves to a stricter moral standard.
But that's about Congress and all of us. I want to know what you think.
I think that we should hold ourselves to a stricter moral standard, and I would never allow CIA to be involved in coercive interrogations.
Where was that moral compass at the time?
Senator, that was 17 years ago, and it's, CIA, like the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marine Corps, is an organization. It's a large bureaucracy, and when you're out in the trenches at far-flung outposts in the globe, and Washington says, here's what we need you to do, this is legal, the Attorney General has deemed it so, the President of the United States is counting on you to prevent another attack.
It was legal.
I'm sorry?
I know you believed it was legal. I want to see, I want to feel, I want to trust that you have the moral compass that you said you have. You're giving very legalistic answers to very fundamentally moral questions.
Senator, that we've provided the committee every evaluation since my training report when I first joined in 1985. In all of my assignments, I have conducted myself honorably and in accordance with U.S. law. My parents raised me right. I know the difference between right and wrong.
Let's move on to the videotapes. You told me earlier this week that you supported the decision of the CIA's Deputy Director of Operations to order the destruction of those videotapes depicting the use of EITs. Would you still support that order today?
Senator, I would not. I think it's, as I said, it's very important that people learn. Experience is a good teacher, and the piece that was missing from the tapes was making sure that we had all the stakeholders' concurrence. There's also another very important leadership lesson. And as director of CIA, when your officers are concerned about their physical security, you can't let it languish in your inbox for 3 years with no action.
We should support that security. Why couldn't the agency have simply digitized that video and then blacked out the faces of any agents in those videos? Why why actually destroy the videotapes? Doesn't that feel like a cover-up, even if it isn't?
Senator, I don't think we were worried about official release. This was at a time when the entire program was the subject of unauthorized leaks, and someone was found guilty of those unauthorized leaks. So the concern was an irresponsible leak of our officers' faces to the world, not an official release.
No, I understand that, but if you would have blacked out the agents' faces, destroyed the videotapes, and then kept a digital record, that would have addressed those security concerns.
Senator, I'm just not a technical person, so I don't.
It's not that complicated.
Well, I don't, Senator, I don't know if that was considered or not.
Do you think that a transcript that says the detainee continued to scream or the detainee appeared to be drowning has the same gravity, the same reality as an actual video?
Senator, I never saw the videos. I do know that we keep very complete and almost verbatim records in our cable traffic. But I think that the issue was the security risk posed to our officers.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time's expired. Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Haspel, you know, we haven't really mentioned the broad support that you have had publicly from Democrats, Republicans, people who've run this agency in the past, people have associated with, frankly, people that this committee members on this committee have shown great respect and regard for, have shown that same respect and regard for you. I heard General Hayden, a former CIA director, say the other day that he would be incredibly comfortable when the president was making decisions. He may have said, maybe even more than comfortable, he said he would feel more secure or something like that if you were the person in the room. That's really what we're talking about right now. We're not talking about what happened 17 years ago. We should be talking about what might happen 17 days or 17 weeks from now. I thought General Hayden actually captured my exact feeling on this topic. The importance of you being in the room, your mastery of the facts, your broad understanding of what has happened during your career all over the world, the cause, the result, the relationships, all of those things. This is a term I think is often overused, and I try not to use it very often, but it is the truth to power. You're in the room, you understand the facts. Talk about your sense of obligation to present those facts and to speak truth to power at a moment when it matters.
Senator, thank you. Truth to power is one of CIA's most important missions. Like with any new administration, CIA has to demonstrate to the new team what we can bring to the table. I'm incredibly proud, even though I come from the operational side, I'm incredibly proud of the analyst at CIA. That's really our face with policymakers, including the Congress. They do an incredible job on the president's daily brief each day. They do an incredible job on the expert briefings they provide to inform the important decisions our policymakers must consider. As I mentioned, there isn't a week that doesn't go by that I am not the subject of a request to have an analyst by name come over and talk about some of the big issues. Our North Korea team has a superb reputation. Our China team is running all over this town. They're so busy providing briefings. We are all about bringing the most sophisticated, objective, all-source analysis we can to make sure that the president and his team have the best intelligence that we can deliver. It is hugely important.
Capitol Police, please remove her.
The question is, what do you do to human beings in U.S. custody? Bloody Gina! Bloody Gina! Bloody Gina! Bloody Gina! You are a torturer! Bloody Gina!
So let's go back. you as a leader of the team, I appreciate that. I appreciate your respect for the team. Let's be sure we've talked specifically about you. You're in the room. There is a fact that either hasn't appropriately been looked at or considered or appreciated in your view. What do you do at that moment?
Senator, thank you. I've already worked with this president and his team for 15 months. I think I have a great reputation with them. I'm at the table with Secretary Mattis and General Dunford and Secretary Mnuchin. I'm at many of the principals' meetings. I back up the former director in the Oval Office. I'm part of Director Coates' team. Sometimes Sue Gordon is with me. I think we're bringing a very high-quality product. As a senior intelligence officer, someone who spent a lot of time overseas in some of these places, the president does turn to me for my view on certain countries and certain experiences. I give him my best advice, but I always separate my view as someone who's been out in the field from the view of our analysts, because we're really there to deliver the objective all-source analysis that they write to support the president.
So you would see yourself as the master of the facts to be sure the president knows all the facts the president needs to know.
I think that's incredibly important, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Senator. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I've been to some of those garden spots with the committee, and I have the greatest admiration and respect for what you and your colleagues have done over the years and do now. That's one of the great responses I have when I come back from one of those trips, and the stations are, the people in those places are brave and loyal and patriotic Americans. A quick yes or no question, not having to do with what we've been talking about. In January of 2017, the IC issued a joint report on the Russia involvement in the 2016 elections. Do you agree with the findings of that report?
Senator, I do.
Thank you. We've talked a bit about the statement in Mr. Rizzo's book that you had previously run the interrogation program. I understand he has changed his view on that. Your career timeline, 2001-03, Deputy Group Chief, Counterterrorism Center, 03 to 04, Senior Level Supervisor, Counterterrorism Center, 04 to 05, Deputy Chief, National Resources Division. In any of those jobs, were you in a supervisory or management capacity in connection with the rendition and interrogation program?
Senator, we'll be able to go over, and I know you have some of this information, but we'll be able to go over any of my classified assignments in this afternoon session, and I can talk about that. Just to be clear, Mr. Rizzo didn't change his view. He was wrong and he issued a correction.
Who's deciding what's classified and what isn't in terms of what's released to this committee?
Senator, we are following the existing guidelines. There are very...
Who's deciding?
We are following the existing
guidelines. Who is we?
Well, I have chosen to follow the guidelines that exist for the RDI information.
You are making the classification decisions about what material should be released to this committee?
I am electing not to make an exception for myself, but I am adhering to existing RDI guidelines. If I may just...
That's fine, but I just wanted to understand that. With regard to the cable, Mr. Rodriguez said that he asked you to ask two questions of the lawyers the day before the drafting of the cable. One was, was it legal to destroy the tape? Second, did he have the authority? Did you mention to those lawyers the intention to issue a cable that would destroy the tapes when you asked those two questions, or were those the only questions you asked?
No, Senator. I explained that Mr. Rodriguez wanted to get resolution on this issue and that he was planning to have a conversation with the director about it, and he needed to have revalidation of those 2 points.
And when you drafted the cable, is that correct?
Yes, at his request.
Isn't it common practice in the CIA when a cable, particularly of this importance, is drafted that it be copied to various parts of the legal establishment within the CIA? And was that done in this case? Was that cable copied to Mr. Rizzo or other lawyers within the agency?
Senator, there was There was robust coordination with the lawyers at CIA
Were they
on
copied
this
on
issue.
the cable?
Mr. Rodriguez chose not to copy the lawyers on the cable because he took the decision on his own authority and he wanted to take responsibility for it. He has been very clear and upfront about that.
And you were aware, because you drafted the cable, that the lawyers weren't copied on the cable.
But I knew that the lawyers had been consulted in a meeting and consulted over many times over 3 years.
In May of 2005, Mr. Rizzo reports, I told Jose and his chief of staff, that was you, is that correct? I can't recall if I talked to them separately or together. They were crestfallen because they were now on notice that the DNI, 2 successive White House counsels, and the vice president's top lawyer had weighed in strongly against destroying the tapes. Do you recall that conversation?
Senator, I don't recall that specific conversation. However, I was aware that there were some objections, and that is why Jose was going to go back to the director.
Those aren't some objections. Those are very straightforward prohibitions by your superiors to not destroy the tapes, were they not?
Senator, I don't recall that specific conversation.
But you do know, and Mr. Morrell in the report which has been released says something similar. He said, the record is clear that Mr. Rodriguez, and I presume you, was aware that 2 White House counsels, the counsel of the vice president, the DNI, the DCIA, and the HIPC ranking member had either expressed opposition or reservation about the destruction of tapes. Did you know that at the time you drafted that cable?
Senator, I don't believe I knew that entire list, but I knew there were some objections, and that is why we were going back to the director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Final question, was it a matter of coincidence that this decision was made to destroy the tapes in the same week that 2 major stories appeared in American newspapers? The 11th Amendment was being considered and the McCain Amendment was on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Was it a mere coincidence that that was after 3 years of delay, the decision was taken to destroy the tapes?
Senator, I don't believe in the Directorate of Operations front office we were aware of legislation. The lawyers may have been aware. I do not believe we were aware. There's a broader question,
not legislation. I'm talking about stories in the newspapers. There's a great deal of public interest just that week in the whole interrogation question. Were you aware of that when you made this decision?
Senator, I do not recall being aware of that.
Senator's time expired. Chair would note at this time, since there's been a reference to declassification, I just want to draw a distinction that the Durham investigation done by the Department of Justice is not in the purview of the Central Intelligence Agency. Any decision to declassify or keep classified is a Department of Justice decision, and I just wanted to separate that from the discussions about Ms. Haspel's background at the agency. With that, the chair recognizes Senator Lankford.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Ms. Haspel, thank you for your over 3 decades of work for our nation. The lack of recognition that you've had for 3 decades from our nation because you've served in a way that no one has seen. So this is an opportunity we get to be able to say thank you to you for a lot of years of a lot of service, being able to protect our nation. It's also pretty remarkable in some of the dialogue today as I go through the very long list of people that have recommended you and that are both Republican and Democrat, and to be able to see the reports that have been written by the inspectors general about you, about previous DOJ about you, that have cleared you of any concerns, and that have reaffirmed you. And whether it is President Obama's director of the CIA, John Brennan, or whether it's Jim Clapper, Director of National Intelligence for President Obama, Henry Kissinger, John McLaughlin, Mike Morrell, Mike Mukasey, John Negroponte, Leon Panetta, George Tenet, the list goes on of people that have looked at your record and that have examined it and said you'd be a qualified leader for that. That speaks well of your history and of your leadership, and we appreciate that very, very much. Let me ask you a little bit about some ongoing threats that are coming at us we haven't had much time to talk about today. Let's talk about the very serious counter-narcotics threat that's coming at us in some of the changing situations that's happening in our hemisphere, dealing with drug trafficking organizations and international drug trafficking in particular. What do you sense is a role the CIA should have in the ongoing work to be able to do counter-narcotics work in our hemisphere?
Senator, thank you very much for that question. And you've been a big supporter of CIA's counter-narcotics work. But when I returned from my overseas posting in early 2017, I was frankly shocked at what I saw was happening in our country, particularly in places like my home state of Kentucky, where there's a real crisis. But I think the number is 63,000 Americans we lost last year. We're losing 115 Americans a day. That seems to me to be an extraordinary crisis for our country. I would like to talk about this, if we could, some this afternoon. But as you know, CIA does have a fairly modest program to try and stop the flow of drugs from coming across our southern border: heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. We work very closely in Central America and Latin America to try and stop that flow. I've been talking to our team at CIA headquarters about this for several months. I've asked them to come up with some options to grow that program. We have extraordinary support for that program on this committee. But I think in light of the fact that we're losing 115 Americans a day, that we're losing almost a generation in some places, that we have to do more. CIA is not the primary agency, but we can do a lot, but it has to be a whole of government effort.
All right, so flip on that into the cyber activities and some of the cyber threats we have. Some of those cyber threats are changing internationally. There were criminal gangs in other countries that were trying to steal credit cards, steal information, and to be able to sell that out there. Now there are some governments that are using the criminal gangs in their own country, and they become this strange hybrid that's out there between a criminal gang sometimes and a government entity at other times. And we're very dependent on trying to be able to identify where these threats are coming from and who those threats are coming from. What is needed with CIA, and what do you anticipate would be the need to be able to help our nation be able to determine who the threats are and where they're coming from?
Senator, you're quite right that it's a growing threat, and it's another area where you have to have a whole of government effort. And it's a very murky world, as you point out. But China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea have very aggressive offensive cyber programs, both to steal secrets, but also in some cases to earn illicit money. CIA can probably make the biggest contribution in collection about these other countries' activities and various groups' activities, so that we can inform the U.S. government agencies that have to mount our defense. And everyone in the U.S. government has been struggling, as all Western governments are, on what is the most effective way to organize yourself for cyber defense. We're still working on that, but CIA has a big role. It's another area that I'd like to amplify on a bit this afternoon if I have the opportunity.
I will look forward to that. I yield back.
Senator Ratchet.
Ms. Haspel, I want to thank you, first of all, for your service to our country, and also I thank you for your efforts on drugs. We're our ground zero in West Virginia, and we need everybody in this fight because it is a war. We must win it. Let me ask the first, what was your thoughts and greatest concerns for the United States of America after the 9/11 attack?
I think for probably every American, it was also surreal, but what I was very worried about, and we weren't wrong about this, is that other attacks were being planned. So I think everyone in the U.S. government, probably across the board, but certainly in the intelligence community and FBI, we all felt that we had let the American people down somehow. We didn't know these attacks were coming, and it was very important to identify who was behind these attacks and stop future attacks.
I think back on that day, and I remember it very vividly as if it was just happening this morning, but I remember that the only thing I cared about, first of all, my first thought was anybody in my family harmed that day. Next of all, anyone that I might have known or related to or thought about or had acquaintances with. Next of all, my final thought was any other Americans harmed? That's all I cared about. What was this doing and what mammoth? I thought about the history, Pearl Harbor. How did we react as a nation after Pearl Harbor? I remember the cruel and unusual internment of Japanese Americans. And we've never gone down that road again. And our thought process would have been there. But let me go another step further. After 9/11, had any laws or rules for CIA procedure changed because of the attacks, of those attacks? And did we change any procedures after that? You're saying you would never do it now. You said you would say no to the president because that's not where we're going. That's not where you want the CIA to be. Were those changed after that?
Senator, I'm not sure I understand exactly, but CIA does not do interrogations. We historically have not done interrogations, and we don't do interrogations today.
Let me go this direction. Are there any other tapes that would reveal agents' identities that have been destroyed, and is that the standard procedure? Or are there any tapes of interrogation that haven't been destroyed, of your knowledge?
Senator, probably I don't know. I don't know if there are any other tapes. I don't believe there are any other tapes associated with the particular interrogation activity that was on the 92 tapes, but I simply don't know if there are any other videotapes of any other activity.
And then we'll go into this. Explain why you feel so strongly today the CIA should not be an interrogation business. And would it have anything to do with basically the makeup of the CIA with the appointments, appointment to the, your appointment now for that versus the code of conduct for the military? Is there a difference of why you think that the CIA should not be in that business and why it should be done in the military?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. CIA historically has not done interrogations. We don't have interrogators, so we just don't have any expertise.
Most of the questions have been directed to you has been because of that.
Yes, that's right. And why DOD, of course, does do battlefield interrogations, and that is why we have the Army Field Manual. We have very clear legal and policy guidance for those DOD interrogations, which I support. And then, of course, the FBI has its own authorities for interviewing terrorist suspects. And then, as we mentioned, we have the high-value interrogation group, and CIA is part of that. We support that with substantive expertise about a particular group or an individual, but we don't conduct interrogation.
And I know you stated strongly. That's why you would feel very compelled to tell the president, no, this is not something we do, and it's not our line of work.
I just think there are other U.S. government entities that are suited to holding detainees, and that isn't CIA.
Let me say this about the CIA and being on this committee for 1 year and on armed services for 6 years prior to that. When I speak to the West Virginia citizens today, I brag about what you all do in the clandestine services and the people they provide to serve for our country to keep us safe. I have never, ever seen the quality of people at that level to make the sacrifices they make and to make sure that they understand the importance and how successful and how good they are, is that for a country that has a target on its back the way the United States has had since 9/11 and probably will for a long time, to be as safe as we have in the most troubled world, in the most dangerous world, with the terrorist mentality. I want to thank you on behalf of every West Virginian in this country for the job you all do.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Cotton.
Thank you, Mrs. Haspel, for your many decades of service to our country and for taking on this new role despite the accusations, entirely false, you know that you would face from some of my colleagues in the Senate and from the media, some of these protesters we've seen here today. I'm very grateful to you, as I know that all the men and women of the CIA are grateful. I have to clear up some of the things that have been said here before. Senator Warner said that he worried about the message we would be sending if we confirmed you to the director of CIA. Well, let's look at that from the other direction. What message would we be sending if we didn't confirm you to the CIA, to the men and women of the CIA, to the GS-15s who may be asked to take on a controversial position that a future administration with new lawyers might not like? And for that matter, what message does overwhelming Democratic opposition to your nomination send? In fact, if you had been nominated by President Obama, or if Hillary Clinton had won and nominated you to be the CIA director, how many votes do you think you would have gotten to be confirmed as CIA director? You don't have to answer. I also have to take exception to what Senator Warner said when he called an opinion of the Office of Legal Counsel that was signed off by the Attorney General of the United States as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Do you believe, acting under the legal approval of the Attorney General, that you or any other CIA officer should have gone to jail and you needed a get-out-of-jail-free card? You can answer that one, please.
Senator, CIA follows the law.
Exactly what I thought. Let's turn to the circumstances of what the Counterterrorism Center was doing the days you were there. I think Senator Collins asked an excellent sequence of questions that got at many of these points. I just want to tie a bow on some of them. These programs were, to the best of your understanding, approved by the Commander-in-Chief, legally approved by the Attorney General, and supported by the Director of the CIA, who I point out at the time was the former Democratic staff director of this committee. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
You said that you were not a senior manager when those programs were created. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was John Brennan a member of the Senior Intelligence Service and the Deputy Executive Director at the time a senior manager, in your opinion?
Senator, I believe Mr. Brennan was the deputy exter of the agency at that time.
And you'd consider that a senior manager position at the CIA?
I believe it's the number 4 position.
For John Brennan, who was confirmed to be the CIA director by the following members of this committee: Senator Warner, Senator Feinstein, Senator Heinrich, Senator Collins, Senator King, Senator Burr, Senator Manchin, Senator Wyden, and Senator Rubio. Let's turn to the question about the tapes that were destroyed in 2005. Did any lawyer at any time in any organization of the federal government say that there was a legal prohibition to destroy those tapes?
Senator, they did not. They were very consistent that there was no legal requirement to preserve the tapes because of the written record.
And it's your testimony that there is a written record that fully documents whatever may or may not have happened.
Senator, yes, and there were 2 reviews done of the written record by the Office of General Counsel and the Office of the Inspector General.
In other words, the CIA has a record no different from the federal court system, which keeps transcripts and allows sketch drawings, but does not allow video recordings in a federal courtroom. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
You were the chief of staff to Mr. Rodriguez when this happened, correct?
Yes.
And at his direction, you drafted a cable that he later sent.
That's correct.
Michael Morrell, who supported Hillary Clinton in the last election, cleared you of any wrongdoing in drafting that cable?
He did.
As did an investigation by the Office of Special Counsel and the Office of the Inspector General?
That investigation was closed without charges for Mr. Rodriguez or anyone.
Would holding you responsible for drafting a cable at your boss's direction make any more sense than holding a Senate speechwriter responsible for the boring speeches senators give on the Senate floor?
Senator, I'll defer to you.
I would submit that it does not. Finally, there's a lot of talk about policy guidance and that there was some awareness by Mr. Rodriguez that higher officials in the government who were political appointees had qualms or expressed reservations. I would say that's another way for which politicians don't want to take responsibilities when they are placed in certain positions, whether they are elected or appointed, and give the answers that they are responsible for giving, yes or no, and take the chips to fall where they may.
Senator's time's expired. Senator Harris.
Thank you. So let's just be clear. This hearing is not about the incredible importance of the service and sacrifice of the men and women of the CIA. That's not what this hearing is about. This hearing is not about the importance of the agency's mission, both of which I wholeheartedly support. This hearing is about your suitability to be the director of the CIA, and in our responsibility to participate in choosing who will be the next director of the CIA. The mission that we have now includes understanding that who we choose will be a signal to the men and women of the agency, to the American people, and to our neighbors around the world about our values as Americans on critical issues that range from our adherence to a rule of law to what we prioritize in terms of professional accountability and what we prioritize in terms of our moral authority as Americans and as a country. So one question I've not heard you answer is, do you believe that the previous interrogation techniques were immoral?
Senator, I believe that CIA officers to whom you referred.
It's a yes or no answer. Do you believe the previous interrogation techniques were immoral? I'm not asking, do you believe they were legal? I'm asking, do you believe they were immoral?
Senator, I believe that CIA did extraordinary work to prevent another attack on this country given the legal tools that we were authorized to use.
Please answer yes or no. Do you believe in hindsight that those techniques were immoral?
Senator, what I believe sitting here today is that I support the higher moral standard we have decided to hold ourselves to.
Can you please answer the question?
Senator, I think I've answered the question.
No, you've not. Do you believe the previous techniques, now armed with hindsight, do you believe they were immoral? Yes or no?
Senator, I believe that we should hold ourselves to the moral standard outlined in the Army Field Manual.
Okay, so I understand that you've not answered the question, but I'm going to move on. So I understand that you, from previous answers, are serving as the authority over whether or not CIA information concerning you will be classified or not. Given an obvious appearance of conflict, will you agree to recuse yourself from the responsibility and the authority to make decisions about whether or not that information will be classified or not? Will you agree to recuse yourself of that responsibility and authority? Yes or no?
Senator, I am following the guidelines that exist at CIA, and there is another declassification authority. It's called the IRO. I have not interfered with it.
Do you believe that you have the authority to recuse yourself?
I'll take that for the record. I may have the authority to recuse myself.
Assuming
I'm not a
you
lawyer.
do.
I'm not sure about that.
Assuming you do, and I believe you do, will you agree to recuse yourself from the responsibility and the authority of making decisions about what CIA information about you and your record will be classified or declassified?
Senator, if I had agreed with the proposals that have come up because people thought it would be advantageous to me, I think I would have been abdicating my responsibility to follow the rules that everyone at CIA follows.
Okay, and you also in this hearing have a responsibility to answer the questions that are being asked of you. I'm going to ask you a different question. Would you agree that given this appearance of conflict or potential conflict around the classification or declassification of these documents, would you agree that Director Coates instead should have the responsibility for declassification decisions regarding your background?
Senator, I think one important thing is that this committee plays a unique role to review the classified record. And we have sent over every piece of paper we can lay our hands on about my classified record, all of my evaluations over a 33-year career. And I hope every senator has had the opportunity to look at that classified material.
Indeed, I have.
But
I have another question for you then, because I only have a few minutes left. I only have a few seconds left. The president has asserted that torture works. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I don't believe that torture works. I believe that in the CIA's program, and I'm not attributing this to enhanced interrogation techniques, I believe, as many people, directors who have sat in this chair before me, that valuable information was obtained from senior al-Qaeda operatives that allowed us to defend this country and prevent another attack.
Is that a yes?
No, it's not a yes. We got valuable information from debriefing of al-Qaeda detainees, and I don't think it's knowable whether interrogation techniques played a role in that.
Thank you, my time is up.
Senator Cornyn.
Ms. Haspel, I note that one prominent national security expert has said that if President Obama had nominated you to be director of the CIA, it would be an easy decision to support your nomination. So it strikes me that you're being treated much differently than Director Brennan was, which Senator Cotton noted he was voted out of this committee by a vote of 12-3 and confirmed by a vote of 63-44 to be CIA director. So it strikes me, and this is not a question for you, this is an observation by me, that you and this president are being held to a double standard, and I think that's regrettable. I also remember that President Obama in 2009 when he declassified the Office of Legal Counsel memos that have been referred to here, promised the men and women of the CIA that, quote, we will protect all who acted reasonably and relied upon legal advice from the Department of Justice, that their actions were lawful. They need to be fully confident that as they defend the nation, I will defend them. And I think this committee and this Senate should remember those words by President Obama and apply those when considering your confirmation. Senator Feinstein was kind enough about a year ago to send me a book by Peter Bergen called Manhunt. It's a 10-year history of the search for Osama bin Laden, where, as I was thumbing through it recently, I was reminded that post 9/11, President Bush was concerned about reports that he had received that Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda was meeting with Pakistani officials connected with their nuclear program to gain access to a nuclear device that they might then use for a follow-on attack against cities like Washington, D.C. Without divulging classified information, can you confirm that there were concerns about follow-on attacks using nuclear devices, biological weapons, other weapons of mass destruction that might have killed more innocent Americans as happened on 9/11? Was that the environment in which you and the country were operating in at the time?
Senator, there were very grave concerns on that front, and indeed Al-Qaeda had those kinds of programs, efforts to acquire crude, dirty bombs, efforts to develop. They had a program, a biological weapons program. I remember the operative who was in charge of that. There was very deep concern about potential contacts, and we continue to monitor this very closely today between extremists and Pakistani nuclear scientists.
So here we sit years following the terrible events of 9/11, feeling very safe and secure, thanks to the incredible work being done by the intelligence community, including the good men and women at the CIA, as well as the men and women who serve in the United States military. We're feeling very safe and secure, and the memories of that terrible event are very distant. But it strikes me that in addition to the double standard that I believe you and this president are being held to, compared to Secretary Brennan, Director Brennan, and President Obama's administration, that people have simply forgotten. And that's dangerous to have forgotten the circumstances under which they were operating at the time and doing their dead level best to protect the country from a follow-on attack. I just want to note in closing that recently I had a chance to travel to a garden spot with the chairman and visit with some of those unnamed patriots.
Thank you for doing that.
In the CIA. And I was struck by talking to one.
All right, guys, I want to jump over to another feed that we have coming in here. This is quite an interesting story, very tragic in nature. The stage here is set for a press conference coming up in the next few minutes. This is in Macomb Township, Michigan. Police and FBI are going to be speaking about their search for the remains of up to 6 girls who may be buried here in this wooded area. This is a case from decades ago, and some leads from the FBI and police have led them to this spot where they think more girls are buried after it was revealed that one specific girl and her perpetrator in this case, a man named Arthur Ream, who was convicted of first-degree murder in this woman's slaying way back when and was temporarily released from prison in 2008, was led to this area to help police understand that she was possibly buried in this wooded area. So now police are going to be updating us on if in fact they know or what they have found as they continue the excavation of this dirt area and this wooded area. to find out if he was involved in the murders of some of these other girls who went missing decades ago. So it's kind of a convoluted case. Police are getting ready here. This is Warren Police Commission. It's also part of the FBI's investigation. So they'll be talking about the conviction and the girls who are missing and what they're looking for and what they have found since they started this search. So it's a lot of information here. They're digging through dirt at this site where the remains of a 12-year-old Kimberly King are expected to be found. That's what they are going on. So a lot of details there. Let's listen in to see what police have to say. This is coming up shortly in a couple minutes in Macomb Township, Michigan. All right, guys, well, until this press conference gets underway, we'll go back to the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing for Gina Haspel. Again, that was from this morning. We played a chunk of it at the beginning of our stream, as I mentioned, and then kind of playing out more of it in different angles for you guys to see as it continued this morning. So that did come to an end. We're just kind of replaying some of that. We're going to go right to this live press conference in Michigan about these remains of up to 6 girls who may be buried in this area. That's going to come up next live. So we're going to switch to that right when I see that starting up.
The American people and the Constitution of the United States. I am honored bound and will work very hard to deliver to this president and his administration the best performance and intelligence CIA can deliver.
And if you were approached in such a way and such a demand was made of you, would you inform this committee and the Congress that you had been so approached?
Senator, I've worked very closely with this president. I don't believe that such a circumstance would ever occur. CIA has been treated with enormous respect, and our expertise is valued for what we bring to the table.
If it occurred, would you inform the committee?
Senator, it's a hypothetical. I don't think it's going to occur. I'm very confident about that.
Does not seem to be a hypothetical. People have alleged that that has happened already.
Senator, I don't know anything about that conversation.
Okay. Now, Senator Harris was asking you about the morality of the enhanced interrogation techniques, the waterboarding. At the time that you were involved in it, in fact, fairly directly, you expressed no moral concerns. In fact, you have suggested that it was good tradecraft and that it contributed to information that was developed. If one of your operations officers was captured and subject to waterboarding today or tomorrow or the next day,
Senator
today. I'm gonna first introduce the mayor of the city of Warren, Mayor James Faust, with some comments, and he'll make making some introductions too. Thank you. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dwyer. It's been almost 40 years today since Connie Bama and Annie Goldbaut lost her best friend. Connie was the older sister. You have one older sister, 1 year older than you. And if your sister was alive today, if Kimberly were alive, she'd be 51 years old, which means I was talking with Connie earlier. Likely she would be a mother, she'd be a grandparent, perhaps. And unfortunately, she misses out on a number of things. Connie was pointing out to me that if her sister was alive today, it's likely that she would have obviously graduated from high school, experienced that. She would have graduated from college. She would have gotten married. She would have had children, and she would have had a lifetime experience. But all that was taken away by some monster, a suspect that we're not sure of yet. She told me that her sister was full of life. So did her friend. Her sister enjoyed scary movies like Dawn of the Dead. She liked Welcome Back, Kotter. And of course, when you think back to that, this has been so long ago that 40 years ago, Jimmy Carter was president. I believe Bill Milliken was governor, and I know that Ted Bates was our mayor. So it's a long time ago, long experiences. And Connie, I don't think, as Connie indicated to me, a moment has gone by that she hasn't thought of her sister, who was full of life. I remember I asked Connie, and Connie said her sister was kind of a tomboy. She enjoyed life. She was adventurous. She was rebellious. And she was a great athlete, and unfortunately she did like to hitchhike. But she has, in my opinion, Kimberly has been robbed of a lifetime of experiences, and I hope today we'll bring some fruition, some closure to that. But as Connie corrected me, it won't necessarily be a closure, but it'll allow the healing process to begin, and it'll allow them to move forward. Obviously, my deepest sympathy goes to the family and to Annie Goodbout, who was her best friend. And I also want to commend the Warren lead investigators, including Jim Twidorsky and Brent Chisholm. Jim I talked with earlier, and he's been working on this related to this site since last October. And as he told me, and as I understand, their goal is once we leave, no one will think to come back. And I know when it comes to Connie and when it comes to Annie, this is what they want to have, some kind of closure, some kind of situation where they can move on. They can have a step in the right direction toward being able to bury her sister, being able to bury her friend, and having Kimberly close to their grandmother. And Kimberly was really raised by her grandmother, and her grandmother was a very important person in the entire family, as was their father. I want to take a minute and thank the FBI, and in particular, I want to thank the representative of the FBI today, Matt Krupa. I want to thank the Michigan State Police, and I want to thank Macomb County Sheriff's Department. It's represented by Lieutenant Steve Briney. This was a cold case for decades, for nearly 40 years. And my feeling is, hopefully, with the advent of DNA testing, which wasn't around 40 years ago, and other high-tech improvements in law enforcement, this type of crime will never, ever happen again, or if it does, the perpetrator will be caught and apprehended soon so that no other young lives are taken. So I hope that with DNA testing and the likes, we can prevent this heinous, horrendous, and unspeakable crime from ever happening again. This may be some sort of end, but as Kimberly King's family said, and for her other young victims, Kimberly will never be forgotten, and the person who did this will never be forgiven. But with that in mind, I'd like to introduce FBI agent Matt Krupa.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. First of all, I know you have a lot of questions. We'll give you some information very soon. Just wonder if, Connie, would you like to make any comments on behalf of the family?
Well, I will try. We're just very grateful to the media for always kept this story out there and alive. We appreciate you. We appreciate everyone who was out here today, who ever put time into this case. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you to the media for keeping this alive, and hopefully it will stay alive. The story will stay alive until we have an answer of what happened to Kim and we can put her remains to rest. I also want to thank Nina Instead, who did the Already Gone podcast that got the ball rolling, to Anoop Prakash for doing an interview with Connie and myself to also get more media, and to Officer Twardesky from the Warren Police for finally interviewing me after 38 years. I was the last person to see Kim alive before she disappeared, and I know that something horrible happened to her that night. She never, ever would have left her sisters and her grandmother worrying about her. Thank you to all the authorities that are here today. And I just pray that they will continue the search until she's found. And thank you so much for your thoughts and prayers for the family.
Thank you very much. I know you want a lot of background as far as what we've done so far. Let me just start with, this is a major effort out here. We're working obviously with the FBI, our partners, the state police, the Macomb County Sheriff's Department. We're we have all the resources necessary. We're going to be taking our time out here. We're going to be systematically going through the search area. The workers that are out there, the FBI and the detectives assigned to the case from the Warren Police Department are working very diligently. They don't mind working 24/7. This is a very important case to everyone. Kimberly, as you know, was only 12 years old when she was reported missing on September 15th, 1979. We do have, as you know, probable cause to believe that this is a grave site. No question about it. That Kimberly King and other young female victims who were murdered are buried here. And that's why we're going to put a lot of time and effort into it. And we believe we have a suspect, and you know who that suspect is. He's already been convicted. He's in prison. We were hoping that we'd get a little more cooperation from him, but we're going to do our jobs as far as law enforcement. This search could last up to 2, 3, 4, 5 days, whatever it takes, we're going to do it. The suspect in this case also did brag about murdering 4 to 6 people to inmates where he's being housed. He was interviewed several times by detectives from the Warren Police Department. He did, in fact, fail a polygraph test, and the investigation is really just in its initial stages. Once we find remains, it's going to be reported. We're very cautiously optimistic that we're going to, unfortunately, find remains. But the key issue here, as far as what we're trying to do, is we're trying to bring closure, to the families of the victims. That's the key here. The person of interest, our suspect, he's not going anywhere. We've had this information for several months. We waited for the right time to do the search. The weather had to be at a certain level for us to do this, and obviously it is. So we're going to move forward on that. But let me call upon our partner from the FBI, Matt, if you come forward, please. I got to really compliment the FBI and their recovery team. They're doing a superb job out there. I was out here yesterday, and they're just well trained, well organized, doing a superb job. So I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Commissioner. Again, Matt Krupa, I'm the Supervisory Senior Resident Agent for the FBI here in Macomb. We are committed to providing assistance and cooperation with our local law enforcement partners when that assistance is requested. In this case, it has been. So we're just glad that we can participate and be out here providing technical personnel and resources for the excavation during this search. I'd like to thank our evidence response team from the FBI Detroit division here who's out here providing that assistance. Thank you.
Anyone else back here? You know, I have to say that it was very important for us to come out today to respond to any questions you have. We don't have any news breaking as far as any findings at this point, but it could happen any minute. Yeah, we're very cautiously optimistic. We've got 15, 20, 30 people in the back working very hard. They're going to stay out here as long as it takes. We're going to try to beat the weather tonight, and we'll be back until the investigation, until the digging, until the search, until the recovery is complete. Now, we'll open up the questions.
Last year, could you tell us the extent of the area that you're looking for? Where is it, and the terrain that you have to go through?
Well, it's very difficult. Yeah, you've already filmed the tent and you've had helicopters up, so you kind of got a good idea. But we're taking it, and maybe I should have our friends from the FBI do it, because they're doing the recovery themselves. As far as the terrain itself is very difficult. It's muddy back there. The first day we were here, when we executed the search warrant on Monday, there was trees that had to be removed, bushes that had to be removed. So we really started the digging yesterday, systematically taking different areas. I think the first area is, well, maybe 100 square yards or so. They've moved to a different area now, and they're very optimistic that they're getting close to this area that they believe that we're going to find some remains, unfortunately.
Could I add something? I was talking with the one investigator, and he indicated that this has a lot to do with guesswork. They've interviewed Arthur Ream, the possible suspect. They've interviewed a lot of other people, and so it's a painstaking analysis, but what it comes down to ultimately is guesswork. It's possibly somewhere here, but exactly where it is, I believe the one investigator told me it's like finding a needle in a haystack. It's very difficult, it's very challenging, but based on interviews, based on analysis, and based on a hunch, they're somewhat reasonably confident that they will ultimately find a site here, but it's extremely difficult.
What information?
I think you know, what the mayor is saying as far as it's difficult, you know, we're looking at almost 4 decades, so you can imagine it's not like you can bring in the equipment of someone that's been missing for a year, 2 months, or 6 months. So that's what makes it change. Matt, did you have anything?
What information has brought you guys back to this property and linked those girls to each other and to Arthur Ream? Is there something that came forward at the end of the year or recently that is bringing you back here?
This was a cold case, obviously, and it was opened up back in November of last year. The 2 detectives, the lead detectives, were assigned to the investigation. What brought us back here is a number of reasons why, a number of findings. The investigation was furthered by interviews with the suspect in this case, number 1. Number 2, other information that was received from inmates in the prison. Number 3, failing the polygraph test. Number 4, other information that I'm not going to reveal today brought us back to the scene.
Did you ask him in the polygraph test if there were other girls, or what about that polygraph test?
Well, I'm not going to get into the details of the interviews and the polygraph tests. But
why did it take nearly 40 years to get to this point, to get to this land?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, you know, this case has been assigned to other detectives, and this is not unusual for a case to go on this long. And we open up these cold cases all the time in law enforcement throughout this country. And this is just an example of going back after many, many years and doing another full investigation so that people, you know, like the sister and the best friend, so they can find, you know, some sort of, you know, support from, and know their support from law enforcement and the community, and give them some rest.
Commissioner, did you say that the person of interest you have bragged? Did you use the word brag about killing?
That's correct.
And did he brag about that to your investigators or to inmates? How do you know who did he brag that to?
Can I add something to it? In talking with Mr. Twardsky, one of the key people that's investigating the special crime unit, he indicated that the individual has been interviewed, and through his comments, they've been able to decipher some indication, and then they've interviewed other prisoners who have also given some indication too. But he hasn't been totally cooperative, so they've had to go by a number of various sources, both with other prisoners as well as with interviewing him. And originally how they found out the first case in which he did take ownership was because he wanted to have some kind of plea bargaining and get some kind of deal from the police way back, 40 years ago or whenever he was apprehended. I think that was at 86 and 86.
Green back here again now?
So,
could I bring the FBI? Matt, will you want to come up and clarify, and then we'll get back to the questions if we could.
Pertaining to the search location, I think the approximate area is about 24 acres, and based on information that we've received from Warren, we're trying to narrow that down to what's feasible considering where the growth has been and what we have access to now. So based on the information Warren has provided to us, we're narrowing down that 24 acres to sites that we think would be more highly productive.
So you have multiple sites that you said sort of mini perimeters at?
I'm not going to comment on that right now, but they're trying to go through everything very methodically while we have access to the property, and in a way that's systematic and makes sense based on the historical information that we have.
Is part of this area, any of these areas, exactly where Cindy Zarzicki was found? Is the discovery of her body in one of these spots?
I'm not going to comment on that right now.
How confident are you that Arthur Ream is responsible for the murder of Kimberly King and other young girls?
Yeah, I defer to Warren on that. Again, we're here to provide technical assistance in the search, and the investigation is being handled by the City of Warren.
Can you talk about the hope this brings, Connie?
Let me say this, everything, our entire investigation targets right in on him. He is person of interest, our main suspect. We can't go on record any further than saying that.
Connie, can you talk about the hope?
Well, it brings a great deal of hope. It would mean a great deal to be able to bring her remains home, obviously. But it looks like it may bring a great deal of hope to a lot of families. So I think this is very important, not just for us, but for many families.
Have you been in touch with some of the other families?
I have not.
Go ahead.
Commissioner, you mentioned the Zarzicki homicide, and Ream's son dated her for a time.
That's correct.
Did you depict these other potential 4 to 6 victims as random because they were years previous, or did he know them? Do you know?
I would say they were random targets. There's no connection between any of the victims whatsoever. You had the one out at 12 Oaks Mall in Oakland County. You had the Canton victim and the other victims. We're very confident in saying that there's no relationship, no correlation between the victims and the person of interest.
Could you add one thing, please, in regard to the believability? You mentioned you wish he cooperated more, he may have been teasing, etc. But yet you also state that you're very confident there are remains here. Can you add a little more there as to why you believe him so?
Yeah. Let me just say this, person of interest, our suspect, he's going to know you're out here. He's going to know that you're out here, Connie, best friends out here, and all we're asking for is closure. Today is his birthday. I hope it's his last birthday, quite frankly, but saying that, we're out here to do what we can as far as closure and complete this investigation.
So you're saying he hasn't been cooperative as far as giving information about who and where these girls may be?
No, he has not.
He's my understanding again, Bill, and to everybody, he was cooperative for the first case that he did take ownership with, but unfortunately for Connie and Annie, he has not been open or cooperative with anything else. However, he's talked with other prisoners and good police work. They've interviewed various prisoners and they've done a lot of analysis, so it involves guesswork and good police analysis. And so based on that, they have some reasonable confidence that these young ladies, up to 46 young ladies, may be buried here. But again, as the investigator told me, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. We've got 24 acres, and where exactly it is, they don't know. But as you told me, Bill, they're going to continue to look until there's some closure for these young ladies here.
Is there any deal to be made to make him more cooperative, more likely to talk?
Say that again?
Is there any deal to be made to get this guy talkative again?
There's deals that could be made if he wants to talk, certainly.
Are we anywhere near?
The door is open. The door is open for him to talk.
Commissioner, what are you going to do? As it rains, as that ground gets wet, logistically, what are the plans?
Well, I think our partners from the FBI have plans to stay out here today as long as possible and come back as soon as possible. This area is being secured every night. by law enforcement. And we'll continue if we get a day or two that we have a problem with as far as being able to conduct the dig and the discovery team. We'll be here, and we'll be here until we end it, until it's completed.
Is there any concern though that any significant rain will, for lack of a better term, wash away the meticulous work that experts are doing out there?
I don't believe so. Do you, Matt?
Well, it's not going to help, but I don't think it's going to cause any major concerns right now.
Can you give us some information on the first body that was found in 2008? How was that discovered, and how was it buried, and things like that?
Well, it was discovered here by the East Point Police Department, and the person of interest we have now, who's in prison, did cooperate at that time with the East Point Police Department, and did in fact come out to this location and pinpoint where the victim was, where he buried the victim.
How deep was it buried?
About 18 inches.
What have you found? Have you found anything on this land?
Yes, but I'm not going to comment on what we found. But what we did found, what we have found, is makes us very cautiously optimistic that we're on the right track.
Commissioner, when did you get the information that bodies were being buried here? Did you find out maybe a month ago and then immediately ended up starting digging, or were you waiting for ground to thaw? Or?
Well, that's part of it. Yeah, we targeted in on this location a few months ago, but we had to wait until the weather changed, thawed out, dried out, so we could get the team, the recovery team in from the FBI in here.
This new investigation, began, according to Officer Twidorsky, began last October. So it's been ongoing since then.
Commissioner, to clarify, please, I'm getting part of it, so forgive me. Just to make sure there are no remains that have been found at this point, and secondly, appreciating as long as it takes, could you see this going days or into weeks, or do you have any idea?
Well, no remains as of yet, correct. But it could be hours, it could be another day or two before we discover remains.
But do you see people out here for an extended period of time, or do you have any idea?
I can only comment that we'll be out here for as long as it takes to complete our recovery efforts. And that could be days, could be longer.
So to be clear,
Something's been found but not remained. That's what you're saying?
True, yes.
You found something that connects this land to the girls.
That's correct.
You believe he's a serial killer then?
We would suspect that, yes.
So will they be working under the lights tonight, or just kind of pull out and just secure the area?
They'll remain here for whatever it takes if they make a discovery. That means if they find remains within the next 2 hours, they're committed, Matt, correctly? They're committed to staying for as long as it takes, bringing in more resources, bringing in lights, whatever it takes.
If you're referring to him as a serial killer, do you think that there could be more victims that maybe aren't buried here? Is that a possibility?
That is a possibility. Now, we looked at the timetable back in the 70s and so on and so forth, and there possibly could be more victims.
Annie, can you talk about what it would mean to you to see a resolution or to see some new information come to light?
It would just help to end this 38+ year horrific ordeal that not only Kathy and her sister Connie and her father have been going through, but all of the young people that we went to high school, or I'm sorry, elementary. Kim never made it to high school. Elementary school and junior high Kim was very popular. There are a lot of us that care about her and still have a lot of hope that this will end one day and we can put her to rest and just go forward.
Was it ever thought that maybe she just ran away?
Never in my mind did I ever believe that she ran away. Not for 1 second.
So we're, in law enforcement, we deal with these tragedies. We have compassion. It's not an easy job. The men and women, as I said in the background, in the back, digging, the lead detectives, they didn't have the opportunity to be here today, right now, because they're so busy doing their jobs. And you have to commend those men and women that are back there, working their hearts out to resolve this issue and to bring closure.
And about how many of those? 30?
25 or 30 total, involving detectives from Warren, Macomb County Sheriff's Department, and the recovery team from the FBI.
An important.
Where was Arthur Reed when Kim disappeared? 1979. Was he out on parole?
Yes. Yes.
An important point that I believe Connie just said, and and Annie also pointed out, is that when she was missing, the police told Connie, and probably Annie too, that she was a runaway and they weren't initially concerned. Is that correct? And so I think that's an important thing to learn from this, that when a child is missing, she's not a runaway, and the police and authorities cannot make the assumption she's a runaway. They have to look for her, and that would have made a difference with Connie and Annie, because they looked for days and days. You made up posters, you did everything you could to try to bring some notice, but the police said she's a runaway. Is that correct? Yeah.
Let me just introduce our Deputy Commissioner, Matt Nichols, Captain Cortland Larry, and Captain Bonet. Captain Bonet is in charge of our Detective Bureau, and his detectives obviously are the ones that are leading this investigation with the state police and with the FBI.
Commissioner, in 1970 and 74, two other girls, Cynthia Kuhn and Nadine Jean Odell, also disappeared. Are they a part of this search?
They could be. They could be. I mean, that timetable, you know, our person of interest, our suspect was in prison for a period of about 4 years. I believe I'd have to look at my notes when he was released, but it fits where they could be.
Are Kelly Brownlee and Kim Laro among the missing girls you think whose remains might be here?
I believe so, yeah. I'd have to double check my notes on that.
Okay.
Well, Bill, didn't you, can you say there were, we suspect there were 4 to 6 girls that could be victims here as well?
Yes, right.
Any of them are?
Yeah. Let me just say this. Our suspect in 1974 was convicted of a sexual assault of a 15-year-old hitchhiker. He went to prison then. And our suspect went to prison in 74 and was released in February of 78, so that kind of answers your question too. He was released 74 to 78, he was in prison.
But no specific names have come up when they said the 4 to 6 possible victims.
Well, yeah, we've indicated there, as I said earlier, the one victim was that we're looking at that possibly could be here was the young girl that was last seen at the Novi 12 Lake Mall and in the city of Canton.
But did those names come from somebody, or is that speculation?
That's Kelly Brownlee, correct?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Just to be clear,
It fits the profile. It fits, you know, his MO, and that's why they're part of this, because looking at the relationship between the first victim that was found here by the East Point Police Department, everything that happened with these other victims fits the profile of our suspect.
Commissioner, do you know if Mr. Ream has any family in the area, and if he does, have you tried reaching out to them?
I understand he's got 2 brothers, or 2 sons.
Has there been any attempt to contact them, maybe get them?
Not recently, not recently.
So when you say fits his MO, can you elaborate what the MO is? Meaning, did he pick strangers up? Or?
Well, that's part of it, yes, that's part of it. I mean, as I said, there was no relationship between, you know, the other victims in this case, but the way they were picked up, how they were picked up, where they were at, it all gels together. I mean, hitchhiking, so on and so forth, shopping, going from point A to point B, it fits the profile.
It's an important note to bring up, and I believe, Connie, you mentioned it to me. It was about this time period that the Oakland County killer was involved. This did not involve the Oakland County killer, but I know the kids were warned, weren't they, Connie, to be careful because the Oakland County killer, but this individual was separate, but it did go on approximately the same time. As far as that's
just to be clear, Reams is the only person of interest in this case.
That's correct. That's correct. Now, let me say this, that we're going to keep you well briefed. The next time we talk to all of you will when we make a discovery. Once we make that first discovery, we'll call a press conference and we'll continue our efforts as far as more discoveries. But we're not going to wait until the entire discovery is over, the search is over. We'll keep you well updated. So the next time you hear from us will be if we make a discovery of remains.
Okay, I'd just like to thank again on behalf of the Warren community, the FBI, the Sheriff's Department, and the Warren Police for the investigative work and effort they're doing. And this is a challenging situation with 24 acres with information from fellow prisoners and Mr. Reams, although he's not, or Mr. Ream, although he's not cooperating. And it is trying to find a needle in a haystack, but I'm confident that with the collaborative effort of the Warren Police, the FBI, the County Sheriff Department, the Michigan State Police, that hopefully we can come to some end for Connie and Annie and Connie's entire family. Thank you.
And again, when we do call the next press conference, we're going to give you a 3-hour notice. So if we make a discovery at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll make the press conference at 5 o'clock. So it'll give you adequate time to get prepared, and it'll give us adequate time to get prepared for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, so like you were mentioning, really just a bizarre case coming out of Macomb Township, Michigan. It sounds like they were just sort of outlining what they know so far and detailing what they've found, and then the next big announcement will be when they actually find some of those physical remains and sort of take steps to discover what really happened many decades ago with that man and those bodies. So unfortunately, sad to kind of end on a tragic note here today. We did mostly cover Gina Haspel's Senate confirmation. If you guys are interested in that, you can just cue back on the stream, and at the beginning of the stream we had it live, and then I replayed some of the interview questions, the confirmation hearing, as she is the nominee. She's President Trump's pick for CIA director. She would be the first woman to do so. So pretty interesting stuff there today on Capitol Hill. Other than that, guys, nothing else really coming in on our video streams, but we'll be back tomorrow with some more live and breaking news, anything that's coming in from across the nation and across the world to show you guys live on Fox 5 Live here in DC. So we cover all different news all across the nation, all across the world. We'll try to bring that to you live as always from our digital news desk here. With that, guys, take care. Have a great Wednesday. We'll catch you again tomorrow for our second midday show. I believe Sam might be coming up next for whatever else might be coming up on our stream. If we do have more live news, we'll bring that to you this afternoon. All right, take care, guys.